Hello, everyone, and welcome to At Barrons. I'm Andy Serwer, and welcome to our guest, Sarah Hirshland, who is the CEO of the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee. Sarah, welcome. Nice to see you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be with you.
So first of all, can you explain the structure a little bit of how the Olympics in the United States works?
Absolutely. Obviously, we're one of 205 countries around the world. Our responsibility in our organization is to field the United States team in these global competitions that we know as the Olympic and Paralympic Games. Different from actually hosting the Games, which in Los Angeles in 2028 we will do again. Last time we hosted the Games here was 2002. There is an organizing committee in Los Angeles who's responsible for executing, holding the Games in this country. We're responsible for the United States team.
Right, and so there's the Paralympic Committee and the Olympic Committee are sort of under your auspices, two different entities, right?
We're an integrated organization, but they are two different global movements, if you will. They're two different global sort of ecosystems. We operate both in this country, and we're one of the only countries in the world that does that.
Right, and there's some other differences between the U.S. Olympic Committee and Olympic committees in other countries as well. For instance, government support.
That's right.
Talk about that distinction, please.
Generally speaking, governments around the world have something that they'll define as a sport ministry or a government agency that ultimately regulates sport in that country. In our country, that doesn't exist, and therefore we are an entirely private and privately funded organizing body for the global sports ecosystem, different than the rest of the world.
So I'm curious about the budget.
Yep.
This is a financial program here. How big is the budget for the U.S. Olympics, and where specifically does that money come from?
Yeah, differently than many organizations, we operate on a quadrennial cycle as opposed to an annual cycle, naturally with the Games going every 4 years. So over a 4-year period, we'll have about $1.5 billion in revenue, and as a 501c3, everything we make, we spend. So we'll break even and over that 4-year cycle. The revenue fluctuates some. In a Summer Games year, it'll be higher. In a non-Games year at all, it'll be lower and we'll actually show losses. But over the course of that quad cycle, we'll even that out and break even. And as I said, we're entirely privately funded. So about 75% of that revenue will come from what is standard commercial, sort of sport industry, traditional sponsorships, licensing, content and broadcast rights. And about 25% of that revenue is philanthropic.
Right. Oh, so a lot of it would be TV rights then, for instance.
A good piece of it, yes.
Right, right.
Yep.
Oh, that's fascinating. And no government support at all?
Not financial. Not financial. The government certainly supports security and a lot of sport diplomacy work. So we work quite closely with the U.S. Department of State around the world with embassies, bringing Team USA athletes as sort of diplomatic tools, if you will, into other countries. But there's no financial support from the government.
Right. And I noticed you're sporting some Olympic outfits here.
Always?
Yes, exactly. Always be branding. So now is that what the Olympic team's going to be wearing coming up, or what is that exactly?
It isn't. This is just your routine day-to-day.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Sort of a little bit of healthy branding. We do tend to be proud of Team USA and the Olympic team. But Ralph Lauren, who for years has been the provider of our opening ceremony and closing ceremony uniforms, they will yet again provide those, and so you'll have to wait till February to see what Team USA is wearing as they come out of the tunnel into the opening ceremony.
Oh, really? You don't reveal it before then?
Actually, Ralph Lauren will. They will start. This is a commerce business, so Ralph Lauren will start putting them on their website and selling many of the pieces. They'll have a whole collection, as will Nike and a number of other licensing partners.
Right, and you're talking about February. That's going to be in Italy, Milan, and another location?
Cortina.
Cortina, the Winter Olympics coming up. How does the team look at this point? Do you oversee what's going on with the picking of the athletes, or how does that all work, Sarah?
Yeah, it's a great question. There is a huge qualification sort of pathway, unique to each sport. In the winters, we'll have 9 distinct sort of sport organizations that come together. Ski and snowboard is the largest on the winter side, and many people know there's alpine skiing, cross-country skiing, ski jumping, right? There are lots of different sort of types of disciplines even within ski and snowboard. So each sport organization will establish what we call selection criteria. That is the proverbial, how do you make the team? And in some sports, there will be year-long ranking systems. In some sports, it will come down to a single event, often called Olympic trials.
Right. And are the trials over for, are
No,
all
no.
the teams set?
No. We'll take about 250 Olympic athletes and another 70 Paralympic athletes. I think we only have a dozen or so right now that know by name that they've made the team. So the next several months, we're 100 days out right now. So really over the next 100 days, it's crunch time.
Yeah, very intense. And I was going to ask you about the Paralympic schedule. I'm sorry, I don't know this, but is it done at the same time as the Olympics?
Just after. So the Olympic Games is typically a 17-day competition, and then there will be a week, 10 days, maybe 12, 13 days in between, and then the Paralympics is usually a 10 or 11-day competition window, one sort of after the next. So we'll start early February and we'll finish about the middle of March.
All right, you mentioned Los Angeles in the summer of 2028. A lot of excitement already building for that. The third time that Los Angeles is going to get the games, joining Paris and London.
That's right.
And so, gosh, a million questions. First of all, any guidance from the Trump administration on this, or where do they stand?
Yeah, we've spent quite a bit of time with the administration, both this one and the previous, as you go through the both bidding process and then the planning process. This is a place where the government really does have to get involved. You're talking about bringing potentially as many as 150 heads of state all to this country all at one time. You can imagine the security and just logistics implications of that. So we do need real support from the federal government on down, right? When you get to the state governments, municipal governments. So there's a lot of interaction with everybody. The Trump administration has been really clear and supportive that they want this to be an opportunity to show the world that we're a great host country. And I think it speaks to the hospitality nature of the president. He understands what being a great host means, and they're committed to helping us do that. So we're feeling good about that.
The 1984 LA Olympics were notoriously successful financially. Was that Peter Ueberroth?
It was.
It was Peter
That's
Ueberroth,
correct.
famously.
Yep.
And so what are you doing to ensure that this one's going to be successful, Sarah?
So like in 1984, there's a series of revenue streams. This one will be entirely privately funded, largely, again, commercially funded. And there's been a lot of work to bring on sponsorship partners, licensing partners, but a huge piece of the revenue around these games will be ticketing and hospitality. So we can expect there to be, I think, in the neighborhood of 10 million tickets sold. And you can imagine that those tickets will range from a very accessible price point, ensuring that young people, marginalized populations, right? Everybody has some access. But I'm also guessing, if I were predicting, that probably the most expensive sporting ticket that's been sold in the United States will be around those games.
Do you pay attention to the fact that the World Cup is coming here first?
Absolutely.
They compete with you?
Not really. I would say it's actually almost it's almost a little bit of a helpful global event that gives us some ability to watch what goes well, what doesn't go well, how are people responding, where are we seeing log jams, things like that you can then work on. The scale of the World Cup is smaller, much more fragmented and spread out. It's a single sport, so it's quite a different event, if you will. But soccer's football to the world is part of the Olympics as well. So in some ways, people will view it as a little bit of it's a bit of a precursor.
Right. And there's always a push to get new sports into the Olympics.
Always.
What's going on with that?
So Los Angeles will be a great opportunity to add and bring some new, I'll say new sports, but also a little bit of bringing some sports back. So baseball, softball, we've seen in the Olympic Games, but not as a regular pattern. So we did not contest those in Paris last summer. But they'll be back in Los Angeles. We'll see squash. We'll see cricket for the first time in the history of the Olympics, which is huge globally. We'll also see lacrosse, which is a fun and very North American sort of origin sport. So it'll be fun to see some new sports contested, and we feel great about Team USA's chances in those sports.
Yeah, it's interesting. So there's baseball and lacrosse, very sort of American-centric, not a coincidence necessarily.
Not necessarily.
That they're going into this Olympics.
Yeah.
1984, again, to harken back to that Olympics, there was the Russian boycott and the Soviet boycott and the Soviet bloc countries. Where does Russia stand in regard to the Olympics today?
At the moment, suspended. And that comes on the backs of, there is something that the United Nations has supported for a long time called the Olympic truce. The Olympic truce is essentially many decades long notion that countries agree during this window of the Olympic Games, everybody will set down their arms and show up to compete under the premise of good sportsmanship. Russia invaded Ukraine during the window of that Olympic truce, and as such, they were suspended by the International Olympic Movement, and they remain suspended today as that conflict really hasn't been entirely resolved.
Oh, so if and when, and maybe this is outside of your purview, if and when that conflict is resolved, presumably they would be allowed back in?
That's what we expect. The International Olympic Committee ultimately makes that decision. That's a Congress of representatives from around the world. We do have a number of American representatives who will sit at that table and help contribute to that vote. But I think the sentiment among the movement generally is that Russian athletes right now, frankly, are being punished for the actions of their government, and nobody wants to see that. In sport, the idea is we want everybody to come compete on a level playing field. So I think athletes will tell you they want the Russians back because they want to compete against everybody who there is to compete against. When you win, you want to win against the best. At the same time, athletes understand there are also rules, and when someone breaks the rules, they have to be punished for that.
Are there any of the countries banned right now?
No.
Oh, wow. That's, not great company to be in.
No, it's
yourself.
not. It's not a place
Right?
you'd aspire to.
Yeah. What about working with the IOC? I mean, some people regard it as somewhat of a controversial organization, which has, had to negotiate through some difficult times historically. What has that been like for you?
I mean, it's a fascinating organization, as I said, comprised of individual representatives who essentially make up the Congress, or the vote, if you will, of decisions at the top from all over the world. And it's a complicated structure in that way. It can be bureaucratic, and certainly you find, the differences in global styles, cultures, approaches really shows up in a dynamic like that. And the leadership matters. And we've just elected a new International Olympic Committee president, Kirsty Coventry, first woman ever to serve in that role. She's African. She's from Zimbabwe. And yet she has real global sensitivity. She came to the United States and went to school at Auburn, was an incredible swimmer herself, gold medalist for her country, and also, I think, took Auburn to the national championships in swimming and was quite good. So she's got a global sensitivity and comes from a bit of a different culture and a different background than past presidents. And she's young. She's 41 years old. I think most of the past presidents have been older, at least 50, 60, maybe even 70-year-old men historically. And so I think we're all sitting back and waiting to see what impact does that have in the way this organization is going to operate going forward.
That is fascinating. When you say Auburn swimmers and Olympics, I think of Rowdy Gaines. You
Yeah.
remember him?
Well, of course. We see him all the time. He still does a lot of broadcast work
that's
for
right.
swimming. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
One thing that's vexed the Olympics and athletic competitions writ large is doping.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering how you would characterize that, Sarah. Is it getting better? Is it getting worse? What's the state of play?
Unfortunately, it's still a very constant reality for not a lot, but one athlete is enough, right? For one athlete to feel like they lost because the playing field wasn't level is really disappointing, and it's a really hard pill to swallow. And it happens. And so, there's still a lot of work to be done. I would say to some degree in our country, although we've got a United States anti-doping agency that's quite strong and does really, really good work. But around the world, the same can't be said for every country. The infrastructure, the resources, the commitment even to anti-doping isn't the same everywhere in the world. And so there are times when American athletes feel like they're being held to a higher standard even than some of their peers. And you can imagine the frustration that brings. So our job is to try to be really active participants in the conversation to sophisticate the global anti-doping structure so that everybody actually shows up and feels like the games are fair.
But there have been some instances, I guess, where you're not on the same page with the IOC, right? That you might take a different position?
To some degree, although the World Anti-Doping Agency, an organization we refer to as WADA, probably more so even than the IOC. WADA has the global purview to make this ecosystem work, and we don't always agree with the way they approach things.
Right. Another controversial issue in sports is transgender athletes, and I'm wondering what the position of the U.S. Olympic Committee on transgender athletes is and how that squares, again, with the IOC's position.
So ultimately, first and foremost, you heard me reference fairness. If you talk to Team USA athletes, and that's who we're predominantly here to serve, number one on their list of important is fair competition. And so our job is to be really conscious of protecting fair competition and fair opportunities to compete. The eligibility requirements for sport happens at an individual sport level, really with their global sport, what we call federation. And each sport has the purview to write that eligibility criteria, to write these policies. Frustrating for us in this country is that many of these international federations haven't written policies at all. Or they've written policies that were hard to apply, inconsistent. And so I think the president's executive order earlier this year was actually a bit of a catalyst for everybody in the movement to start to say it's time to get very clear and consistent around policies. All of the candidates who ran for the IOC's presidential seat made clear this was a priority for them and that protecting women's sport was a priority for them. So we're watching both the global environment and I would say domestically, sort of the move to create policies that are very clearly going to ensure that women have a fair opportunity to compete. But there's a long road yet to go until this is, I would say, consistent across sport or even consistent within an individual sport on how things are set and how they apply domestically and then around the world.
How big of a concern is this particular issue for you, Sarah?
You know, I would say it's important. It's absolutely important. You never want someone either to choose not to compete because they don't feel like they can compete in a fair environment, nor do you want someone to feel like they're not being treated fairly. And so part of our job is to represent Team USA athletes. As you can imagine, there are athletes on all sides of this issue. It's complex. There's not an enormous amount of alignment in the medical or scientific community around it. But the court of public opinion, if you were to ask, really does understand the notion of fair play and fair competition in sport. And I think at the end of the day, that's going to help drive this, at least in the short, in the window that we see in front of us.
I want to get back to sports being eligible for the Olympics and being ineligible. I mean, you throw sports out sometimes, right?
Sports can be cut.
Right, cut.
They can be.
What's the criteria for which ones have been cut, and what's the criteria for getting in and for getting booted?
As you can imagine, it can be political, it can be fact-based. So there are a number of ways these things can happen. One of the things the IOC does is try to evaluate, I'll say, the success of sports that are contested at the games. That could be popularity. They're also looking at safety. And so the reality is if there are sports that they believe are really high-risk sports that at the same time are not really popular, they're going to look at that and say, what are we doing here? Popularity, importantly, as I reference that, it's also about what they term universality. So the Olympic rings represent the 5 continents that the movement is divvied into. They want to make sure that there are athletes on all 5 of those continents who are significantly participating in a particular sport. So you can't just have a sport in there. The question I get asked all the time is, why isn't pickleball in the Olympics? Well, pickleball's really only played in the U.S. right now.
Is that right? I didn't know that.
Perfect example.
Okay.
Yeah.
But some things are kind of curious. For instance, soccer, football. I mean, you could argue that it's very redundant that the Olympics has that, given that the World Cup is such a huge force, right?
Yes, although I think if you asked athletes, they would tell you that the individual world championships and World Cups in their sport are entirely different than the Olympic Games. The multi-sport environment is distinct. The stage and the spotlight is bigger. And so I think there's a difference.
And speaking of football, the biggest sport in the United States, nowhere near the Olympics, and no sign of it ever becoming an Olympic sport. I'm talking about American football, the NFL, or even college football.
Tackle football.
Tackle football.
But flag football,
yes,
with massive support from the NFL,
right,
will be contested in Los Angeles for the first time ever.
Is that right? And is it men, women, co-ed? How's
Absolutely.
It working? There's
no co-ed.
No co-ed.
Just
but
male,
there's
female.
Be male, female.
Absolutely.
And how many teams?
I think there are 6 teams each, 6 men's, 6 women's teams on each side. And I will tell you, surprisingly, there are some global teams, in particular female teams, that are really good.
Oh, I can't wait to watch
So
that.
the U.S. is going to have we're going to have our hands full trying to compete there.
And tell us about your story. Did you grow up wanting to be the CEO of the U.S. Olympic Committee?
Never.
Okay.
This was not part of the plan, but it's an incredible honor. I did grow up a very mediocre athlete, but I loved sport. And I loved being around an environment that was really a unifying force, and a place where lots of good values were taught and learned. And you learned how to lose, and you learned how to win, and you learned how to be on a team, and lots of things that I really enjoyed as a young person. So working in sport was something I always wanted to do. I spent a lot of time in the for-profit professional sports space, did a lot of work in professional golf, and did some work in other professional sports, really on the consulting and business side of things and revenue generation. And so this was an opportunity that, while it wasn't on the linear path, to work across sport and to do so for, as I like to say, the one team we can all agree on is truly the honor of a lifetime.
All right, and final question, and this is just between the two of us, and this is a big question. So who is going to light the cauldron?
Right?
In LA. And I mean, you can just
whisper it to you.
Just whisper it to No, let me ask you serious. So how do you make that kind of decision? That's one of the most fun decisions you can make.
And the good news for us is that the abundance of riches we have with legacy athletes who have become iconic in American households is robust. So I'm not sure. It will not be me who makes that decision. The Los Angeles Organizing Committee will make that decision. But I can tell you, they're going to have to spend a lot of time thinking about that one. And there will probably be such a parade of Olympic and Paralympic alumni that go through that, both the torch relay, but then also the ultimate last few meters and yards of that it'll be quite a story.
Rayford Johnson in 1984, I believe, right?
Pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Well, and I think Janet Evans handed the torch in Atlanta to Muhammad Ali,
Yeah.
which is a moment that
I'll never forget that moment.
I think nobody will ever
Yeah.
forget that moment. So let's hope we have the ability to create more of those kinds of memories.
We will be watching. Sarah Hirshland, CEO of the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee, thank you so much for joining us.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
This is At Barrons. I'm Andy Serwer. We'll catch you next time.